Dear aspiring dev, the tech industry is vast and there are tons of disciplines within development alone. Sometimes new devs think that web development is their only entry point into this industry, and that's not exactly true. So let's have a look at some other amazing options. Hi, I'm Bree, and welcome back to my channel, and welcome back to Dear Aspiring Dev, the series where I take new and aspiring developers on the journey from having the dream to getting the job. This is the third video in the Dear Aspiring Dev series, and if you haven't seen the other two, I will go ahead and leave a link in the description and somewhere up here as well. One of the questions I often get from new developers is, what do I need to know to be a developer? And it's never good to answer questions with questions. But typically I ask, what kind of development are you talking about? Many times new coders are talking about web development, but I never want to assume since there are so many kinds of development. So today we'll discuss web development and why it's so common for new developers to start with it, other disciplines within development, the nuance behind software developer and software engineer titles, and how to pick a branch of development to work with. So this video is only going to cover the highlights and some of the popular languages on some of these popular disciplines. There are so many different types of development, and even in these different disciplines of development, there are so many different branches, and I could never cover every single one of them. So this is just going to be the highlights. So if you're a new or aspiring dev, it's very likely that you might have thought about or considered starting with web development at some point. So I think web development is pretty popular among new devs because it's very accessible for people and because the learning curve isn't as steep as it is in some other disciplines. Also, most of us use the internet daily, so it's easy to see and relate what you're learning within web development to real-world examples that you're interacting with on a daily basis. Exposing yourself to different types of development will help you pick a style that is right for you and for your interests. So let's get into it. I've picked a few that I think are fairly popular and ones that interest me as well. So let's consider this like speed dating, but for the different types of development. If you see one or you hear about one that tickles your fancy, I would encourage you to do a little bit more research about it. You never know what you'll stumble upon, and you might find something that you actually really enjoy. Number one is a starting point for a lot of people, and it's front-end development. Front-end devs usually develop with the user experience in mind because the customers, stakeholders, users, those groups of people are going to be the people who are interacting with their work the most. At the base, front-end developers typically use HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. However, there are constantly new frameworks that are being released to make development a little bit easier and sometimes a little bit more fun. So these can range from styling frameworks like Bootstrap and Material to larger libraries like React and Angular. Now within front-end web development alone, there are so many different branches that you could go down, but it's important to remember that the trinity of technologies that are typically used for front-end development are HTML, CSS, and JavaScript at the core. So the next one that we have is front-end development's sibling, which is back-end development. Back-end developers are responsible for designing and implementing logic for back-end systems that are accessed by the front end. So these backend systems can be as simple as being used for data retrieval or as complex as something like creating an algorithm that's really complex for a search engine. So backend developers also use a very large variety of languages, but some of the common ones are Java, C++, and Python. So next we have the parent of front-end and backend development, which is full stack development. So full stack developers are basically a combination of front-end and back-end developers. They have the ability to do both, but don't always work on both ends at the same time. This makes them very flexible, and because they are flexible to work on both parts of the system, employers find them very valuable. So in terms of technology, full-stack developers really use both sets of technologies from front-end and back-end. Next up, we have iOS and mobile development. So mobile and iOS developers create and design applications that run on mobile devices. Today, where everything is being shrunk to fit in our hands, mobile developers are extremely important. Some of the popular languages used by mobile developers are Objective-C and Swift for iOS, and Java and Kotlin for Android. Now we have data scientists. So data scientists are responsible for gathering and analyzing large sets of structured and unstructured data in order to find trends and manage the data. So data scientists are really cool because their positions are typically a combination of computer science, math, and statistics. Some common languages that a data scientist might use are Java, Python, and Rust. Next up, we have cloud developers. So cloud developers are very similar to backend developers, but one of the main differences is cloud developers create systems that are going to be running on virtual systems. Some common technologies that a cloud developer might use are Java, Scala, and Python. Next up, we have embedded systems engineers. So embedded systems engineers are responsible for creating the software that's used on embedded systems or devices. So these systems are comprised of software and hardware that are used to complete a specific function or group of functions. These systems can be found in things that we use every day, like TVs and cars. So they're using newer technology like Python, but also some oldies but goodies like assembly and C. So next up, we have game developers. So as the name implies, video game developers are responsible for programming and developing games that run on all kinds of systems like consoles, PCs, and of course mobile devices as well. So I feel like game development is also one of those very, very large disciplines where there are tons of branches that you can spin off of, and the technology that you're going to be using for game development is going to be dependent on whatever branch you've chosen. But some of the popular languages that are currently used for game development are C#, C++, Java, and JavaScript. And the last one that I have for you today is software test engineer. So software test engineers have a very important role, and they're responsible for creating automated tests, catching bugs in software, and determining if code is ready to ship to production. So two of the common languages that are used for software testing are Java and JavaScript. So that was really a quick overview, but did you notice something? In one way or another, all of the roles that I mentioned involve software development. However, some of the roles that I mentioned did not include the word developer or engineer in the title. So are they even developers or engineers? The answer is yes. At times, software engineer or software developer can be used as a blanket term. 10 software engineers can be in one room together, and every single engineer can be doing something different with different programming languages. Just because the role doesn't use the term engineer or developer doesn't mean that there isn't code involved in their job. This is something to take note of, especially when you start looking for different positions. What you'll find is if you're using terms like software engineer and software developer exclusively, you might be missing out on roles. So that, of course, was a really quick overview of some of the different disciplines within development. Like I said earlier, there are so many different roles and so many different branches that you could get down. But if some of them sounded interesting to you, again, I would suggest that you do a little bit of research and maybe even look for a day in the life of whatever role it is that you're interested in to learn more about that position. So how do you pick one that's right for you? One of my favorite things to do, and if you've seen some of my other videos, you'll already know this, I like to recommend that you start with a question or something that interests you and move down from there. So if you're interested in websites and how they work, of course, web development is going to be an awesome place for you to start. If you're interested in creating apps for phones or for tablets or anything like that, maybe take a look into mobile development. Take whatever you're interested in and find the development that correlates to that interest. So once you find a development style that you really enjoy, stick to it. Do you have a hunch about the kind of development that you want to start with? Some disciplines are a little bit easier to start with than others for sure. I can promise once you learn your first programming language, things will get a lot easier. After you learn your first language, it's really about learning the syntax of the new language because you already know the main programming concepts. If you're having an, I want to try blank development, that's awesome. And if you're still thinking about trying web development, that's also awesome. I only made this video to show multiple different kinds of development, not to sway you one way or another. Whatever you're interested in, go with it. So that's all for now. In the next video, we're going to be talking about goals and plans. We're going to be taking your big goals and making them smaller, more achievable goals, and taking those goals and turning them into plans. So make sure that you're subscribed and have notifications turned on so that you don't miss a video in this series. And thank you all so very much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed, and I can't wait to see you next time.